Hi, my name is Elsie Chung, and welcome to my podcast. Today, I will be comparing two primary sources that demonstrate the evolution of women's rights over time. My two primary sources are the celebrated letter by Abigail Adams called Remember the Ladies, written to her husband John Adams, and a prominent speech made in Denver by Hillary Clinton, one of the most well-known and influential women of today. Women's rights has been a struggle from the very beginning, as the rights of women vary from culture to culture. Even now there are some limits on women, but are becoming less and less as women prove to be prominent figures in society today. My two primary sources will demonstrate how the rights of women expanded from 300 years ago to now. We will begin with the First Lady, Abigail Adams' letter to her husband, John Adams, that was sent in March 1776, where she wanted to remind her husband to remember the ladies. During the time that she wrote the letter, women's rights were very small, from where they worked, the education they received, and even their right to have a voice in government and in society. For example, most women did not receive education like men, and they also did not have the right to be involved in politics or be able to vote. However, this impactful letter marked in a way the beginning of the fight for women's rights. In the letter, Abigail Adams stated, "Men of sense in all ages abhor those customs which treat us only as the vassals of your sex. Regard them as beings placed by Providence under your protection, and in imitation of the Supreme Being, make use of that power only for our happiness." This shows that during the time that she was writing the letter, men did not look very highly upon women. She believed that they should look upon them with more love and care and tend to their happiness since they are humans as well. She then continues on to say, "Do not put such unlimited power into the hands of the husbands. Remember, all men would be tyrants if they could." This quote strongly emphasizes that women barely had any power, and if men could, with all the power and positions they held in society already, they would become highly controlling with all the power they have. Abigail Adams then makes a stand to John Adams, voicing for the female body during that time, and states, "I desire you would remember the ladies, and be more generous and favorable to them than your ancestors." With this, she is asking her husband, and a man of high authority, to actually remember the ladies and to not think so lowly of them. She is basically showing that women should have some rights in society and should have a voice in the nation. If particular care and attention is not paid to the ladies, we are determined to foment a rebellion and will not hold ourselves to bound by any laws in which we have no voice or representation. This not only proves the determination her mind is set on, it also displays the fact that women want to have a voice and representation in the nation where they live in and follow the laws of. She asks a question that many women want to ask. Why can't we have rights like other men? Why should we be put down in society? This is a very good question, and with this question in mind, women began to fight for their rights and break down the numerous limits that were put on them. Fast forward approximately 300 years later into the year 2009. Today we have many positions held by greatly educated and influential women that prove to be prominent figures. There are many women who hold government positions and make impacts in society, one very prominent figure being Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton was the first lady ever to get so close to being the runner-up in the presidential race. She made history by going against men and running in the presidential race and by influencing the nation as she worked her way through the government. First as a first lady, and then as a political leader herself. In 2008, Hillary Clinton made a speech in Denver that demonstrated how much women's rights have expanded over the past 300 years. Hillary Clinton states, "I haven't spent the past 35 years in the trenches advocating for children, campaigning for universal health care, helping parents balance work and family, and fighting for women's rights at home and around the world." This clearly shows that women's rights increased greatly. In Abigail Adams' letter, she was basically asking of her husband to remember the ladies and let them have a voice and representation in their nation. And now, 300 years later, Hillary Clinton achieved many things that back then only men would have dreamed to achieve. She campaigned, she advocated, and she even fought for women's rights around the world. Quote, "And Congresswoman Stephanie Tubbs Jones, a dear friend to many of us, a loving mother and courageous leader who never gave up her quest to make America fairer and smarter, stronger and better. Steadfast in her beliefs, a fighter of uncommon grace, she was an inspiration to me and to us all." End quote. This proves how much women actually was able to have influence on the nation, as they held prominent positions and made an impact on the USA. Quote, "And I know what that can mean for every man, woman, and child in America. I'm a United States Senator because in 1848 a group of courageous women and a few brave men gathered in Seneca Falls, New York, many traveling for days to participate in the first convention on women's rights in our history." End quote. This quote explains the beginning of how women's rights were forever changed as they began to start fighting for their own rights. Quote, "These women and men looked into their daughters' eyes, imagined a fairer and freer world, and found the strength to fight, to rally and picket, to endure ridicule and harassment, to brave violence in jail. And after so many decades, 88 years ago on this very day, the 19th Amendment guaranteeing women the right to vote will be forever enshrined in our Constitution." End quote. This also shows the beginning of change over time as women were finally able to vote, and was made official as it was added to the Constitution. Note, the Constitution, for them to be able to vote. She also states, "My mother was born before women could vote, but in this election my daughter got to vote for her mother for president." This is a main statement that shows that so much has changed over time, that there has been so much evolution of women's rights over the past 200 to 300 years. All of her speech summarizes and displays how there was so much evolution over time with women's rights. About 300 years ago, Abigail Adams was writing a letter to her husband to remember the ladies, and that women will fight for their rights so that they can make an impact in their society. And through that, Hillary Clinton speech showed how much change there has been since then. Her speech mentioned the fight for women's rights that began in 1848, to then they were finally able to get an amendment that allowed the freedom of women to vote. Her own daughter was able to vote for her, which shows how much power women can have in society today as well. In conclusion, from these two primary resources, you can clearly see and sense the huge and major evolution of women's rights from 300 years ago to now. With enough diligence and a dream, focus, and set in your mind, anything can be achieved. And women improved just that. Thank you!